So, man, this is great. Thanks for having me. It's been 4 years since I've given a talk, and it was right here, so this will be good. Let's get weird. All right. The last few years have been hard, maybe too much to handle. We're all stuck inside. My favorite conference was canceled. The explosions of hiring, the demands were untold. And then came the layoffs, and the job pipelines ran cold. But you're an engineering leader, where people will look for what to do next, and I haven't found a book that will spill out for me the exact plan. So we're just gonna try for the best we can. Hi, I'm Jeff Lembeck. I'm a senior engineer at Catchpoint. I work on web page test. You hopefully know about web page test. It's like 15 years old. It's been around for a while. It's real neat. My company let me come out here this week, so I figured I'd shout their name out right there. Anyway, I've got a good gig, but everything hasn't been magical. I've gone through what a lot of other people in this room have gone through in the past year, losing coworkers, losing bosses, company pivots, product pivots, reorgs, all with the added stress of recruiter emails slowing down. And it's just like at the back of your head. Also, have any of you read the news ever in the last 4, 5 ever years? I got real good at doom scrolling during lockdowns, but it feels all the time like the whole world and the industry is falling apart. And I am one of the people who's lucky enough to not lose my job during that time. So now we're in a position where we all have to do more at our companies with less. And we have to make sure we focus on the right things. And the thing to focus on is money, because it's always about that, always. Now, I work on a web performance tool, but also this is a subject I care a lot about. The resiliency and the reach of the web is a powerful and potentially democratizing force in the world. So I not only feel obligated to do what I can to help the company make money, because they pay me, and I really love getting paid. Literally my favorite thing about work. But also, I feel like I owe it to everybody else to make the things that I work on be fast and accessible as well, because also I carry around a tremendous amount of guilt for things I did earlier in my career, like ringback tones. Does anybody remember those? I'm sorry. Anyway, I've been working through my guilt with my therapist. She's worth every penny. But today isn't about our past regrets. Today is about what we can do going forward. And my argument is that every engineer that is at a company that is at a minimum default break-even or not Series A should be taking stock of their technical debt right now, and that includes how their websites perform, so they can make the experience as nice as possible for the users. If growth all around is going to slow, we don't want to piss the users we have off. Yeah, I used finance words back there. Sorry, management gets in your brain like a parasite, and it just never leaves. It just eats there forever. So default break-even means you're coasting. You're not losing money. You're not growing a ton. You could just do what you're doing for a while. Series A is the first round of venture money a company raises after their initial seed investment. Okay, more rhymes, more rhymes. Leadership, oh, this is really the best movie, Sid. You're correct. Leadership is flailing, worried about failing. It's time for you to take charge. You can persuade to do it your way with a personal and data-filled barrage. Manage up and convince. Don't just drop hints if you don't want the problems to lurk. Show them the data and get to the point if you want to focus on performance work. In the book, The Staff Engineer's Path, which is heavy on my recommended reading list for everybody here, Tanya Riley said there are 4 disciplines to every job: core technical skills, product management, project management, and people management. And I will tell you that every single one of those gets used every week if you are at a staff level or above. But one thing that ties all of those things together is your ability to convince others that your idea has weight and value. To do this is a skill, and it takes time to practice. You need enough data to back your idea to thoroughly convince somebody who is rational. And then you need to remember that humans are extremely not rational beings. So you've got to go in all soft and businessy with them. Just like, oh, not only will this help retain our current users and lower our churn, but it will prepare us to make conversions faster in the future. You can use that. Then you slam them with the data. Go right for the numbers. Here's an example to use. According to Skilled.co, 47% of customers expect a web page to load in less than 2 seconds, no matter what device or connection they're on. They also showed that conversion rate was tied directly to that load time. When the load time was 2.4 seconds, 1.9% conversion rate. I think that was for Walmart. When it was 5.7 seconds, 0.6% conversion rate. If you can make that change, that's tripling your conversion rate, and I like to refer to doing that as a resume line that will get you hired more in the future. And that's just speed that I'm talking about. Doing regular checks on a broad selection of devices for usability issues is a really great way to make sure that more people can use your site happily. That includes your iPhone 8 carrying CEO. It's like anybody else have that? It's like a CEO's got like a 5-year-old phone, but also has like 2 Lambos. Is it just me? Okay. Priorities. So again, come with the data. Write a one-pager that really backs your proposal up. Then, knowing that humans are humans, appeal to their emotions. I've seen a lot of flailing from leadership at companies lately. You can help them. We've just gone through a bunch of hard stuff. We can reduce churn, we can increase conversion, we can have happy users. Okay. You've persuaded your bosses, and that's a big win, but you've looked at your site and where to begin. There's so many issues, it's hard to know which ones to tackle, which ones to let go. But fear not, my friend, there's a way to sort and prioritize our way into making the backlog short. So don't be overwhelmed by the task at hand. With a plan in place, you'll take a stand and make a site the best it can be. What we need to do is figure out priorities. So you convince the bosses that it's a good idea to focus on web performance. Great, good start. More money, good. Better user experience, good. Accessibility, they're almost there. Like, you can feel them grow a little bit of empathy when you describe it. We'll call that a win. But also their skepticism has gotten the best of them. And you're not going to get the entirety of Q3 to knock out stuff that makes the site fast and accessible. Reality is what it is. So what are you going to do? I'm going to call back to the title of this whole thing the best you can. Let's figure out what needs to get done. And figure out how to move forward incrementally. Bosses love it when you move forward incrementally. First, you need to find out where you are in all of this. And that means testing. You need to test your site's performance, and you need to do it regularly. What kinds of tests? Well, there are 2 types that are relevant to our current conversation: synthetic testing and field testing. Synthetic testing is when you predict what your users will experience by automating something similar to what they might run into. You need to figure out what it's like for a Moto G Android user in Milan. What about a Firefox user on a 4G connection in Mumbai? Or heck, a Chrome user from Washington, D.C. in the US. That's how you evaluate that. And with synthetic testing, the testing devices will simulate the experience on command and will give you the data that you need. Highlights to this: you can run this kind of test at any time in the development cycle. You can also automate it for monitoring. You can see where regressions happen and where the really bad parts are. The other kind of testing, field testing, is what you run after you deploy. It's normally JavaScript. It loads on a user's device and shoots off to you a bunch of timing-related data. This will get you the exact user experience. And field can give you some wild outliers, which is great. Your 95th percentile kind of people, the ones who are riding on a train as they head into work. The type of data I love from this most of all is user interactions. This is your opportunity to grab first input delay. Well, don't worry about that one anymore. Google's removing that from Core Web Vitals. This is your opportunity to grab interaction to next paint. What's interaction to next paint? I'll talk about that later. Anyway, both of these testing types have their place, and both are important. So if you can land yourself a tool for each, you're in better shape. Get a synthetic testing tool, get your field data. Okay. You've got your testing out of the way. Now, let's figure out what to do first. Because honestly, you know that some of these user stories are just going to have to slip in 1 or 2 at a time into a sprint. You know how this is going to work out. Find out where you're hurting and go. Easy? Right. Well, you probably need to know what to do about those numbers. Your tests give you a wall of data. You don't know what to do. There are charts and numbers and acronyms too. To find out what is next has you quite vexed. The puzzles around your head are surrounding. But there are resources to check and websites to read to keep you from drowning. For after you gather all of this data, you'll find the exact things you need. You start to sing because you learned a few things. And now you can focus on speed. Let's talk about going fast. Love going fast. You got this big wall of data, and I think we're going to need to address it one piece of it at a time. The first number that a lot of people like to focus on, because it's got first in the name probably, and it's time to first byte. TTFB. Is your TTFB longer than 1 second? Bad. First byte timing relates to DNS, network latency, and the time it takes a server to connect and return a response. So let's look at how to address these. First, I think the important thing is, like I said earlier with testing, so monitor your things. If your company can afford it, get an application performance monitoring tool in your stack. I'm a sucker for Honeycomb. It's real good. If not, start sending server timing headers. If you haven't seen those, I don't have time to talk about them today. Look them up on MDN. It's a really good resource. But make sure you only send those to admins. Anyway, when things go slow in TTFB world, I tend to poke actually at the CDN to see if I can speed up things with that by caching to it. And honestly, get a CDN provider. Faster connections, better caching, really great DDoS protection built in for some of them. And shout out to anybody here who works at Cloudflare. You saved my ass like 3 months ago, so thank you. Anyway, if it's fine there, it's your server stack. Check your queries, check your rendering times. You really should be able to get the response generation down to around 200 milliseconds. So shoot for it. You're not web scale. That's pretty tragic. OK, so you have your TTFB in check, but the site is loading slowly. Let's dive into that. Maybe your rendering is blocked. I'm pretty sure the amount of seconds it takes for you to render your site is directly proportional to your bounce rate. Is this number high? Let's fix it. The first place I check, render blocking JavaScript files. By default, references to external JavaScript files will block the page from rendering while they are fetched and executed. Often these files can be loaded in a different manner, freeing up the page to visually render sooner. So give it a try. Maybe you can add defer to the script. Add the defer attribute to the script tag. What's it do? It makes the browser fetch the script in parallel while it shows the page. Then it executes them once the DOM is built in the order that they're defined in the source. Don't need them to go in order? Use the async attribute. It does what defer does, mostly. But there's no guarantee of the order, so it fires when ready. Is the script small? Why waste the network call? Or the cache check? Inline that thing. I know that the people are like, no, go with that, do it. JavaScript is your most common big, nasty render blocker, but CSS can also come for you. Do you have multiple CSS files you're loading? Are any of them small? Why not inline them? Give that a try and see if it speeds things up. Watch how much you send. Is that file just plain huge? Do you really need all that CSS? And definitely not least thing to mention here is third-party scripts. Third-party blocking requests are particularly risky, as your page's access relies on their response time and availability. And third-party's hard. You probably didn't have any control over whether or not that thing got added. Marketing team probably went a little heavy on Google Tag Manager. It's time for you to both approach this one from a technical and personal side. On the technical side, test to make sure your site still works, even if those scripts go out, either from timing errors or 404s. That's good to do. Then it's time to have the talk. Go discuss with your marketing team every script that they have injected. Marketing people, in my experience, lovely. They do not want to make your site slow and unresponsive. They just want to get paid. And sometimes that means doing things like getting Google Analytics in there to figure out funnel conversion rates and to make sure their ad spend is going to the right place. Sometimes they forget about a script that's been added. It happens, and clean it up. Also, maybe have a quarterly meeting at a minimum, with a marketing person for your team anyway. Figure out what you can do for each other. It's a cold world out there. Friends are nice. After figuring out render blockers, it's good to check on anything else that might affect your first contentful paint, or FCP. To quote Google, FCP measures how long it takes the browser to render the first piece of DOM content after a user navigates to your page. Images, non-white canvas elements, and SVGs on your page are considered DOM content. Anything inside an iframe isn't included. AKA, how soon did text and images appear? Now, I'm gonna be super real. The amount of times where start render and FCP venture from each other is not too frequent. That being said, if you've got a text-heavy site and a blocking font, it's time to not do that. Maybe add font display swap to your fonts so the text will show in the native fallback you've picked, and then once the font is loaded, it will switch. Bonus to this, this is widely supported. So you got your first few numbers out of the way. Let's take a look at another heavyweight, largest contentful paint, or LCP. LCP is the first thing that I'm mentioning here of what Google deems the core web vitals. These are an evolving set of metrics focused on loading, interactivity, and visual stability. LCP is focused on the loading part. More specifically, the metric reports the render time of the largest image or text block visible within the viewport, relative to when that page first started loading. Anything above 2.5 seconds needs work. Anything above 4 seconds, bad. You might be like, you just used contentful twice. You talked about these, how different can they be? It turns out the answer is pretty different. First contentful paint is built on top of the paint timing API, which has one definition of contentful. Largest contentful paint, however, is built on top of the element timing API, which actually has no definition of contentful, but does have a list of elements it will expose timing for. And I just grabbed that directly from a blog that Tim Cadlick wrote. So I'm going to put that slide here. You can feel free to tweet it at him. OK, back to the show. Now, LCP is very good at what it does, but it has some hangups. And this is why we check a few different numbers. For example, you build a page that is a big SVG and it has no image tag in it. That right there is a 0-second LCP. FCP will register, though. Also, if the images showing are too low entropy, LCP ignores them. That's new. Why did they start doing this? That's like a couple weeks ago. Why? Well, they say by ignoring very low content images, Chrome will instead report the first paint with either text or a more contentful image as LCP. This may result in LCP times increasing. If a low content background was being painted very early, if a low content placeholder was being used to reserve space for a more contentful image which loaded later, that's your problem. This may also improve LCP in cases where a low content background or viewport overlay was being added to the page after other content. So that's good. Now you know that stuff. What you might have picked up is that a big block of text or a meaningful image are really going to make that LCP time. And text, unless it has font issues, is not likely to be your blocker. So let's focus on that big image you have. First thing you can do, preload it. Preloading tells the browser to request the image earlier at a high priority that it might have otherwise. That can save you time. Most definitely, do not lazy load that big image. Lazy loading images is for images that are out of the viewport. You can also add a priority hint. This will cause it to be requested earlier and at a higher priority. Last, and certainly not least, optimize your images. Make sure that you are serving appropriate assets for the viewport. Don't just throw a monster JPEG at a tiny screen. It's not necessary. Optimize images for different viewports and use source set or, heck, the picture element. Love the picture element. To pick the right images to show. Drop the byte load and everything else comes a lot faster. And also, maybe just say no to the carousel. We all know nobody likes that thing. It's there so stakeholders in the company can feel special that they got their image up at the top. You know that's what it is. Just say no. Stop the product people from being indecisive. Okay. Sometimes you're on a site and you can feel your blood boiling. The way it performs is making it work require toiling. This makes people mad as they click around sad, your site jumping all over the place. The customers open their email and let out the anger as the red gets all over their face. So, if you want to face customers who have a sense of civility, it's best that you focus on usability. What's the point of having a site if it's jumping around a bunch and feels barely usable? If I load a site quickly and then try to click on a link, but the whole layout moves and I press on an advertisement again, I'm going to lose my mind. Let's talk about some metrics we have around that. We'll start with CLS. Cumulative layout shift is a measure of the largest burst of layout shift scores for every unexpected layout shift that occurs during the entire lifespan of a page. That is a mouthful. So what's a layout shift? A layout shift occurs anytime a visible element changes its position from one rendered frame to the next. If you get a burst of those things, they call that a session window. The largest burst that the CLS number is based on, that's the session window with the highest scoring, all the layout shifts within said window. CLS scoring is on a decimal system. You want to get it below 0.1. If you're higher than that, what do you do? So actually, the most common thing that I've seen for layout shift is images missing aspect ratios. If you know what it's going to be, put the height and weight in there, or height and weight, height and width in there, because the browser can't tell how tall or wide the image is beforehand, and it loads it after and just moves your stuff around, cause the content to shift. A real solid trick is also to put containers around your ads that have this. If you're going to have ads load, you can't help, use a placeholder in that space that takes up the width and height of that ad. You can also make sure to not shove a banner on the top of the page telling me to install your app. Okay. You could also stop relying on JavaScript for the way your layout is put together, please. It 2 talks just last session that talked about that. Zach and Martin are smart people. Listen to them. Okay, CLS isn't the only thing that can cause usability issues. What about when the page loads and I can't seem to click on anything? Normally that means the UI thread is blocked. They call the time we have a blocked page total block time. I'll be forthcoming here. High TBT is normally a JavaScript issue. Parsing and executing a ton of it at once can block that main thread and thus should be avoided. I don't have better advice than that. Sorry, heroes. Less JavaScript makes the browser do less work. Less work is a faster and more usable website. This one in particular can smack you when you are dealing with rehydration, so it doesn't even save you there. So maybe watch out for it. Let's talk about Interaction in XPaint. Google announced last week that in March 2024, Interaction in XPaint will be taking over for first input delay as a core web vital. What's IMP? IMP assesses a page's overall responsiveness to user interactions by observing the latency of all qualifying interactions that occur throughout the lifespan of a user's visit to a page. And basically, the longest interaction on your site needs to be lower than 200 milliseconds. And that's on underpowered devices as well, because longer than that is highly noticeable, and it's really frustrating. And if you're all like, I'm ahead of you here, I measure all my core web vitals, and they're great, and you use a front-end framework to build what you build, you could and should still likely be concerned. Why? Well, Tim Kadlick, great guy, remember him from earlier, ran a BigQuery this week, like 2 days ago. Out of the top 100,000 websites, if you grab the ones that use React on them, 91.6% of those have a good first input delay. It's great. But only 17% have a good IMP. That's the bad range. And core web vitals affect your Google SEO status. You got a year. Get scared. So there's CLS, TBT, and IMP, but my favorite usability metric, how many ACKS violations do you have? ACKS truly has been the standard for accessibility testing on websites. It should be part of your workflow and should start your projects by getting into your build chain. There are probably other tools. It's just the one I picked today. That way, you're not begging to fix accessibility issues later on. Or even worse, your sales team isn't begging you to fix accessibility issues because they want to close a huge contract with a government agency. And guess what? Basically, every government agency out there requires accessibility in their web, or requires that the website must be accessible because they have an Accessibility or Disability Act that covers that. And this isn't just about money or a big scream for me about the morality of making sure that everybody can use your website. It's a little bit that, don't get me wrong. But it's not all that. Part of this, completely selfish. Accessible things work better for everybody. Listen, I am old now. I have reading glasses, and I do special exercises, so I don't hurt myself by using a mouse or trackpad too much. So when somebody makes a table keyboard navigable, good. Solves a lot of problems for me. When somebody uses a slightly larger font size and maybe chooses colors that have a higher contrast, I am able to use their site more easily. I am a target for better usability, better accessibility. So to bring it home, we got to find a way to focus on our teams when times get hard. And they've been tough. But with focus, we as engineers, who are leaders, need to pull the group together. We can manage up to our bosses, get some easy wins in, and see a better performing site. This hopefully gives us a situation where we can create some room, keep our jobs, and build a better experience for our users.
Hey.
Oh, yeah, what's up?
So you're doing the rhyme adventure thing again, huh? It's a little cringy that you can't just give a talk without a shtick.
Yeah, I get nervous when I'm up here, and I feel like that helps me connect with the crowd and makes the content more memorable.
Fair enough. Well, I've been locked in here and listening to you and going along with the whole apocalypse vibe you got going on.
And?
You're being soft. I expect a whole rant out of you.
About?
I think you already know. Out here talking about layoffs like this wasn't a byproduct of some ridiculous stuff in the tech scene.
Yeah, okay, you're right. I've been tiptoeing around this subject. I'm overtime, so I'm sorry for this rant. Why am I giving a web performance talk about quick wins you can get while you're understaffed and potentially overworked? It's about money. Let's talk about Silicon Valley here for a minute.
A dragon, huh? Subtle.
Yeah, anyway. The Bay Area is not the whole world by any means, but its influence affects all of us. For about 15 years in the United States, interest rates were bottom level low, basically zero. When interest rates are low, borrowing money gets really cheap, and investors throw their money at stocks and buying into companies. And tech stocks, over the last 15 years, were the target. So venture capital firms were suddenly flush with cash. This allowed them to throw money at every problem under the sun. Hiring boomed, which made the market for engineers jump through the roof. Suddenly, nobody can find people. The overall price of running an engineering department increased. Meanwhile, companies with super high costs are being kept afloat, no matter how much money they lose. So these places can just pivot over and over, raising new round after new round. And then the tech boom of the pandemic happened, and the money jumped even higher. There were whole startups that had a hiring plan that was just keep going, do not stop. Honestly, that's what the plan was at a lot of the big companies too. And well, if you have increasing team sizes and constant pivots, complexity is soon to follow. SaaS to solve every problem popped up anywhere you looked. In tooling, developer experience started to give precedent to developer productivity. And if you can keep throwing infinite money at this problem, that's fine. But then the money dried up, and the complexity of what we were building caught up to us. And the engineering departments were all way oversized, with huge plans in their eyes of the future. And that's being generous. There weren't actual plans, just dreams of Lambos. So the cuts came, and the reckoning with what we'd done. And so when you hear people talk about the lost decade of the web being the last 10 years or so, this is how this happened. There was financial incentive for us to build complex software because complexity grows teams and builds up layers of management, and then everybody gets rich, right? Except only the VCs did. Most places floundered. But we followed suit, and we built this complexity in and ignored some of the bigger looming problems. And I mean we. I was there too. I just wanted to get a hot tub boat, man. I was encouraging small packages and lots of downloads and forever-sized node modules folders. And as I'm up here, I'm reminded of the best thing a coworker, Forrest Norvell, has ever told me. Technology is something that happens to people. When we build something non-performant, we are happening to our users. And now it's time to clean up after that. And we have far fewer people to get out of this mess than we had creating it. And it's stressful, but we got to start somewhere. So we're just going to have to do the best we can.
Dude, that feel good?
Yeah, it did.
Therapist is worth every penny, huh?
Absolutely. Thank you.